In recent years in the mental health area, there's been an explosion in the categorization of mental health disorders.
Mr. Burns, I'm afraid you are the sickest man in the United States. You have everything.
You mean I have pneumonia?
Yes.
Juvenile diabetes?
Yes.
Hysterical pregnancy?
A little bit, yes.
Is there a time in the future when we will look on all of this as just different ways of thinking, different personalities? That there's just a spectrum of a beautiful array of different personalities that people have, and that we've fallen into the trap of trying to deeply categorize those and try in order to make sense of them and to sort of pathologize them and to make them into problems to be solved. And George Bernard Shaw once said that all professions have a self-interest in dysfunction. I think that's very true. Every profession, you know, that the engineers have an interest in dysfunction of things breaking down, so they have to fix them. The dentists have a self-interest in tooth decay because they need to address that. And probably the same is true of psychiatrists, that they need the dysfunction. It's no different. I don't think that it's any evil in a profession. It's just that it seeks out problems that needs to be solved, and that's a natural and positive thing and a benign thing to do, but it's not when it reaches into an area where it's expanding the scope unnecessarily. And I think the same is true of the categorization of mental disorders, which has kind of exploded in recent years. We used to have a couple, you know, depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder and so on, and all of those are fairly evident and are fairly transparent as to what the disorder is and what the illness is and what the characteristics for that illness is. But now we have narcissistic, very trendy terms as well, like narcissistic personality disorder is a big one, and everybody is a narcissist now. It's a label that's thrown around excessively, and for people who aren't narcissists or people who are, but it's more of an insult than the category sometimes. The trendy one that's thrown around now is borderline personality disorder, and it's something that increasingly in recent years people are talking about and self-diagnosing quite a lot, and in groups that I go to, people talk about borderline personality disorder as their condition. And if that helps the people involved, then that's great. If it helps them make sense of their difficulties and their challenges in the world, then that's a positive thing, that categorization. But sometimes, however, I wonder if it's causing more complications and causing more difficulties and more problems than it's solving. And there seems to be a drive. The DSM is the kind of manual for psychiatrists, and it's updated every couple of years. And the number of disorders now has exponentially grown. The appearance of more work for psychiatrists. But is it leading to better outcomes for normal people? And I would wonder about that. The jury is out on it. I think it's probably fair to say we're seeing mental health deteriorating significantly worldwide at the moment. So there's possibly a case that it is not working. And really, I think there's a fact out there. It's just a simple fact that there's 8 billion people in the world, and everybody has a uniqueness about them. And there is a spectrum of different behaviours and thoughts and attitudes and approaches. And a lot of that would go back to NLP, that we were all, I suppose NLP would look on us as kind of programs that are running procedures based on our attitudes, founded by our beliefs and our value systems, and that all of that can be broken down. What NLP would say is that all of that can be broken down, so you can model people. So if somebody's successful, you look at the beliefs that they have and the attitudes and so the programs they're running in order to achieve that success, and that should be totally repeatable. So success leaves clues, and you should be able to adopt all of that and repeat that success, and that's a very empowering idea. So we are all very radically different. We all have our own uniqueness, and sometimes I think the categorization and that explosion in a number of networks now of categorization, if that's just trying to put a box on every variation in character and every variation of personality, and ultimately if it keeps expanding and multiplying exponentially, then the logical conclusion is that there'll be 8 billion different categories for every type of person. And I wonder, is the logical conclusion that it comes full circle, and that at some point in the future, when we have a more mature attitude towards mental disorders, as we call them now, will we simply look at them as people who think differently to other people? And will the word disorder disappear? And a lot of these things, like depression, anxiety, and I suffer from these things, and I've suffered them for many years, but even when you do, it's very difficult to understand what they are. But a lot of them are simply programs that you're running as a result of various trauma that you've been through, particularly as a child, certainly in my case. And there are programs and procedures that you're running as in your personality in order to cope and provide yourself with self-defense mechanism for handling that trauma, or possibly avoiding it, and for coping with life. It's an unconscious programs that you're running, and sometimes those things are benign, and sometimes those things are malign. They're dragging your life backwards. But the overall aim of your personality and your consciousness and unconsciousness is to protect you. And sometimes it tries to protect you by pushing all of those feelings downwards, and sometimes it brings them up to the surface, and that can lead to unusual reactions and behaviours, some not positive, which we then label as anxiety and depression and so on. I think that somewhere out there has to be a more mature approach to all of these things, rather than putting a sticker on it, on the box, and saying you have narcissistic personality disorder with various degrees of bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder type 2. All of that. Shakespeare once said, "A rose by any other name would still smell as sweet." And what that gets to the bottom of, it's a great quote, I think what it gets to the bottom of is that labels are effectively meaningless. The rose is a rose. If it was called a xylophone, it would still smell the same, it would still sprout the same. And I think our labeling of our characteristics and our personalities is becoming ridiculous at this point. And it's a profession eating itself and becoming, and possibly trying to find problems, or multitudes of problems that either don't exist, or it's trying to feed on more problems that may not be necessary to create. And that perhaps a better approach is a more simplistic approach, and to look at people as humans and to say what their needs are, and to look at what are our basic needs. We need to be social, we need to get out there, and there are moves towards that now, where people are being prescribed social activities. So to go to social centres, where community centres, and I think community centres are probably our best hope for dealing with a lot of these disorders, and loneliness, which is an epidemic as well, in order to bring people out there, bring people out of their heads, and doing what we've been programmed for millennia to do, which is to socialise with one another, to help one another, to have affection for one another, and to do less thinking, which is probably a part of the problem. And I think thinking is probably what leads a lot of us to where we are. That's something that I've been thinking about a lot. Maybe we've overcomplicated our mental health system. We're over-designing it, and all of this over-categorization is leading to more problems instead of less. Let me know in the comments what you think. Let me know in the comments what kind of diagnosis you've received yourself, and if it's helped you, and if it has helped you, that's great. See you next time.